Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering the woke boycotts. The Bud Light distributors are absolutely furious because the Bud Light company won't support them and help them through this boycott disaster. Sales are tanking, everybody knows that, but the distributors are now stuck having to plan layoffs because the manufacturer won't support them financially. And more than not support them, the Bud Light people are actually threatening the Bud Light distributors. The distributors could have never anticipated this would happen. They have been supporting this company for years, in some cases, decades, doing the hard work of actually making sure that bottles and cans were on shelves and there when they needed to be sold. But now, the first time they actually have a really serious problem, much worse than the Up for Anything debacle, which was a few years ago, distributors are finding they can wait all they want. They're not going to get help from the company. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. I'm trying to get up to 25,000 subscribers, so if you can subscribe, please do subscribe. Okay, this story comes from Beer Business Daily. It's a regular beer business publication. It's got great inside information, and they tell us what goes on between conversations between the manufacturer and the distributors. And last week they had a meeting, and at this meeting, distributors were absolutely shocked. Anheuser-Busch distributors are waiting for Godot. And that's Godot, not Godot. This is Godot. Waiting for Godot symbolizes the absurdity of existence, the purposelessness of life, and how suffering increases with the passage of time. Waiting for Godot was a play, and they were waiting on this character, Godot, who never actually came. Here's what Beer Business Daily has to say. Last week, members of Anheuser-Busch's management committee, including Michel Becaris himself, and he's the guy who's the CEO of the whole main international company, not just the US company and certainly not just Bud Light. They also met with former chairs of the wholesaler panel, which is a group that gets together to advise and communicate with the wholesalers, the independent distributors. They held a meeting to discuss the ongoing volume crisis for Bud Light. The volume crisis is really severe, and what they're talking about is a 28.2% drop. That's just this week in volume of cans and bottles sold. It's 24.4% in revenue, but the drops have been severe and they seem to be getting worse as time goes on. Now, wholesalers that Beer Business Daily spoke to before the meeting were optimistic that Anheuser-Busch would reveal a plan that included financial help for struggling distributors in the form of relief on fuel surcharges and mandated expenses, better splits on discounts, reduced free on-board margin enhancement, and things like that, but no concessions were offered. The financial help they're talking about is this. It's one thing to sell less beer and make less of a profit. If their sales were just down, say 28%, 24%, it's one thing, but it affects the structure of their whole business because these independent distributors, a lot of them are focused on Anheuser-Busch products, and Anheuser-Busch's Bud Light brand made up 40% of all of what some of these distributors were selling. So when the volume crashes like this, and in some markets, it's much worse than 28%. We know from this ABC News article, it's as bad as off 60% in Florida, for example, or 40% in Delaware. Other places, Staten Island, it's off 50%. So these distributors, really, they're in a position where they're financially crushed. And it's one thing to lose revenue and have less profit. But when your whole system is built on a certain amount of business volume, and then that volume disappears because of this ridiculous Dylan Mulvaney promotion and the worse than ridiculous response from the Anheuser-Busch people when they saw the market was getting upset about it, the distributors get stuck into a position where they can't even really properly cover their expenses because their overhead is way too high because they're not selling the volume they used to sell. It's not just losing 30% of profit. This could be losing all of their profit. When they're hoping for a better discount or better terms with FOB, FOB is you're going to pay shipping if you're a distributor, wherever your merchandise is coming from. It means it's free, but only free at the manufacturer's doorstep. So they won't even help them with the costs of shipping. They don't want to give them a bigger discount. If you were a distributor and you were selling Bud Light right now, I'm sure you would think it would be appropriate to allow you to have a larger percentage of profit on the sale of Bud Light. It's a lot of extra trouble to sell Bud Light right now. A lot more so than any other beer brand. But no, they're getting no cooperation from the company. All they promised them was more communication this week, and they gave them a serious and stern warning not to speak with trade press and threats that any coordination among them to demand relief would be met with no relief for those distributors. So they were told, do not talk to the press. Articles like this are devastating, talking about how the sales reps are not making enough money to live. This just continues the narrative. I understand why Anheuser-Busch would not want interviews with distributors talking about how difficult times are right now. But they need to do something to help these people out, because these people don't have access to money the same way that Anheuser-Busch does. Yes, Anheuser-Busch lost as much as $27 billion in stock value. The stock started to creep up a little bit, so they're down maybe only $20 or $22 billion at the moment. That's what happens when you're a big company and you have a public stock. You can raise money from your stock, you can raise debt, you have revenue coming from a whole bunch of other sources, banks give you extended credit lines. A lot of these distributors, yes, they probably have deals with banks so they can borrow money from banks here and there, but they don't have access to money like Anheuser-Busch, the company, does. The company should be supporting these distributors right now. And what I get from this, in that they're not supporting these distributors, who are the people that actually and literally, it's not just shipping. They take care of a selling function and relationships with these retailers that carry their stock. The distributors are the ones that are supposed to be telling retailers right now, hey, look, we trust the company. Things are rough right now. They're going to turn around. Don't worry about it. The distributors need to advocate for the manufacturer. They're being put into a situation the manufacturer is making it impossible for them. Aside from financing, Anheuser-Busch controls like 500 brands, many brands in the United States. There's a lot they could be doing with distributors to prepare them for the future. The future of Bud Light is this brand is not going to be disappearing from the shelves completely, but they're going to be disappearing more and more from the shelves as time goes on. We know that in September is when retailers look at their sales from the last period and then decide to adjust their shelf space based on what's actually been selling in their stores. And we know Bud Light hasn't been selling. We know that because Anson Frericks, former president of Anheuser-Busch, has been talking about that publicly, saying, hey, they've got until the end of August. And at that time, the books are closed on what the sales were. And the retailers, regardless of rebates, regardless of promotions, are not going to stock these beers that aren't actually selling. They're going to give additional space to the ones that are actually selling. Completely logical, and that is how they do it in every industry. Merchandise has to sell or it can't go on the shelf. That's how the stores make money. What Anheuser-Busch could be doing is talking to the distributors and saying, hey, look, our other brands are also hurt, but they're not as badly hurt. And as we've been seeing in some of the reporting, the other brands are coming back a little bit. They're not at the level that they were, but they're not as badly destroyed. Even Budweiser's not doing as badly as Bud Light. So the manufacturer could be supporting the distributors with their other brands, which would be great because the reality is Bud Light is never coming back to the #1 spot. It was on the way out before all the boycott anyway, supposedly. So why not help the distributors transition, no pun intended, to selling their other brands? It really wouldn't cost the company much of anything to do something like that. A couple of dollars, a little bit of extra promotional effort. But the biggest thing it would cost them is having to be realistic and admit, okay, we did destroy the Bud Light brand. It's not going to be a #1 brand ever again. We made a mistake. And now we're going to help our partners, the distributors, to incorporate our other products and make up for all the lost sales. And the other thing they could be telling them is, hey, we're going to give you some additional discounts. We're going to work with you. We're going to make you glad that this problem happened. We're going to subsidize it and we're going to fix it. We're going to work on this together. They didn't say anything like that, which means they're still freaking out at the head of Anheuser-Busch. The management does not yet know how they're going to address this or what's going to happen. And they haven't accepted reality that unlike other boycotts, this one was permanent because the product was permanently rebranded with Dylan Mulvaney. The distributors have this attitude according to Beer Business Daily. Anheuser-Busch InBev for nearly 15 years has been pulling billions of dollars a year out in free cash flow, profits basically, from their U.S. operation, the operation that these U.S. distributors have been supporting that whole time. Yeah, the distributors made their money, but Anheuser-Busch made billions on top of that. They took that money, they spent $100 billion buying SAB Miller, and now it's high time for them to invest at least a portion of the billions that they took out back into supporting their U.S. network of distributors. The U.S. network of distributors are getting weakened by the day because they're too dependent still on Bud Light, and no one is helping them to transition away from this loser beer that was destroyed by the company's ridiculous promotion with Dylan Mulvaney. That's where the distributors are at. I don't blame them. I think it's completely ridiculous that they're getting threatened by Bud Light. But tell me what you think. Do you think Bud Light should be supporting these independent distributors and helping them figure out what the new reality is going to be? Don't they want these guys to be able to be financially viable so they can continue to buy beer from them and support them to sell whatever other products that Anheuser-Busch is going to make? Isn't that what you would be doing if you were them? Do you think the distributors have a right to be furious that they can't get support from Anheuser-Busch when the destruction of the Bud Light brand had nothing to do with the distributors, like absolutely nothing to do with distributors? It was all a failed promotion from corporate. And lastly, do you think they have a point that they've been taking billions and billions and billions of dollars out of the U.S. network of distributors? Now is the time they should step up and support these guys a little bit more. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.